You're live. Well, good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson, the host of the podcast Life Along the Merrimack. We are on 96.3 Joppa Radio. We're on television as well, local cable. And each week we talk about the health and history of the Merrimack River. And this is a wonderful week to be doing it because we're November 10th and it's a beautiful day. It's warm. It's not quite as summery as this slide would show you, but nevertheless, it's a beautiful day. And what I want to do today is talk about some of the scenic views of the Merrimack River. I just completed a book called Life Along, well, the show is Life Along the Merrimack. My new book is Merrimack, the Resilient River. And there's almost 80 color photographs. And one thing that I felt about doing the book is many of us have never seen some of the beautiful parts of the river. We drive our cars, some people kayak and canoe, some fish, but there are many parts of the river we don't get to see, or maybe we don't have time to see them. So today I wanted to go through some slides that are in my book and that demonstrate the beauty of the river. It's 117 miles long. It starts in central New Hampshire. And here is a shot kind of at the end of the river. This is Newburyport, of course, looking at Salisbury, and then beyond that, Amesbury on the right, and Newburyport on the left. And this actually was taken by a drone. Drone photography is becoming quite popular. And this is a good example of showing some of the beauty of the river and the fact that there are hundreds of boats are moored there each summer. One of the things I'm amazed by is the marsh in the upper right. It's a 25,000 acre marsh. It's the largest one north of New Jersey, which means the largest in New England. And it's very instrumental in the life of the area on the North Shore for fish, for birds, for all sorts of animal life and insect life. So as you can see it on the right, the marsh is a very valuable aspect of the Merrimack River Valley. Here's a wonderful shot. This was taken by Brian Eaton he's from Salisbury. Until recently, he was a photographer with the Daily News here in Newburyport, where I used to work. I covered the waterfront for about 6 or 7 years, a lot, and I wrote several books as a result. Nautical Newburyport was one book. New England Coast Guard Stories, which came out in March, is another book. And I just finished Merrimack, the Resilient River. Here you can see a church steeple in the background. I think that's the old Methodist church in Newburyport. There's numerous boats. And of course, there are numerous islands in the stream as you go upriver. This is a wonderful spot in Newburyport. It's Joppa Park. If you've ever driven down towards Plum Island, you've likely seen this. It was created in about 1971, and it's been improved constantly, I must say. But it's a wonderful place to take a walk, if you have children, to see the beauty of it, to sit down and read. There's not much parking here, although I must say they did improve the parking area. There's about a dozen spots. But this is a very old part of the city. There used to be many clam shacks here. There were boat yards just to the west of this. You can see the American Yacht Club in the center, the lower part of the picture. But it's a tremendously historic spot. And the city has done a good job with redoing the park, getting some vegetation in, some flowers, some grass, some seats. So Joppa Park, in my view, is a wonderful park not far from the downtown. Of course, here is the beauty of the Merrimack River. This is the Whittier Bridge, which was put in several years ago. It cost about $300 million, federal dollars mostly, to install it. And if you were around at the time, you probably remember the many traffic dislocations that occurred. But it's a beautiful spot. You can see the tranquility of the river. And of course, there's one of the old mansions in the background. Maudsley State Park is also a part of that woods. And Maudsley is a wonderful spot as well. It's on the river, as you probably know, 450 acres. The city and the state acquired it in about 1985. The state runs it. And it was really a great asset for the city to receive it. There's horseback riding there. In the winter, there's skiing, cross-country skiing. Of course, you can take walks. You can get down to the river easily. You can have a boat here. I mean, the steepness of the banks and the difficulty of that, there are no boats on the river here at Maudsley, but it's a historic spot. The bridge has added greatly to the city. And of course, it's part of the interstate highway system. On the notion of highways, I was a bit unhappy to recently see that the Park and Ride, which is in Newburyport, right near the highway, is going to be closing up. That they're moving it to Seabrook, I think. And I was really disappointed because this is one of the last great deals in town. You could go park your car if you're going out of town. Even for a week, it was free. So you could drive up, leave the car, put your bags on the C&J bus service, and then you were off. And again, if you were paying at, the airport in Boston at Logan, you'd be paying $30 or $35 a day. This is free, and it was a great deal. Also, there are a lot of commuters who used to get the bus from that area, and they park their cars. And I've got to learn more. It's possible that will be a bus stop that'll start in Seabrook, maybe have a stop in Salisbury, maybe have a stop in Newburyport. It just seems very unfortunate that it is leaving completely. And so here you can see the beautiful river. Maudsley State Park is in the background. And a lot of people actually have moved to Newburyport because of things like parks, the river, and I must say, the bus service and the train service. Here's a wonderful shot of Amesbury. Brian Eaton took this one. I think in the foreground are two stories by Lowell's Boat Shop, which is a historic boat building facility in Amesbury. It's been there for many, many years. But this is probably one of the prettiest areas of Amesbury. And Brian Eaton, a photographer, really caught a wonderful shot here. People have been using the river, of course, for many years, and it's just a great asset. Amesbury has the Powwow River, as you know, or might know, and it does come into the Merrimack. But at least going through the middle of Amesbury, the Powwow is, can be quite vigorous. It doesn't often offer too many recreational opportunities, at least in the middle of Amesbury. And then it comes to the Merrimack. But here's a wonderful shot showing you a calm day on the Merrimack. And the Atlantic Ocean, of course, intersects with the Merrimack River. And in a tidal, when the high tide is coming in, the tide goes up almost to Haverhill. So it goes past Amesbury and it goes past West Newbury, and it goes upriver. But as I understand it, it stops just a little short of Haverhill and then starts going down again. So the tide and the river has always made this a difficult river for newcomers, especially. Some people come in with their boats from different areas, and they're not aware that the river has a strong flow. If they're not aware of the tides, they soon learn about it, because an incoming tide hitting the strong flow, the strong current of the Merrimack creates, choppy water and difficult times for smaller boats. If, on the other hand, the tide is going out, it also creates problems. So as you might know, there have been, every summer, numerous vessels get hung up on a sandbar, or they get hung up on, they might even get pushed into the jetties. But getting back to the beautiful part of the river, here's a wonderful shot of Amesbury. Several communities on the Merrimack River had significant histories involving the textile industry. There were many textile factories along the Merrimack River, including many in Haverhill. Haverhill, Lowell, Lawrence, Manchester, New Hampshire, all had very large textile mills. And that's one reason why my book is called Merrimack, the Resilient River. For many years, pollution and dyes from the textile mills and sewage from the cities went right into the river. Now, of course, things are better, and we're kind of fortunate for it. And most political folk and historians say that the big change came in 1972 when Senator Ed Muskie of Maine and others passed the Clean Water Act of 1972. This gave $1 billion in grants to communities along the Merrimack, along the rivers of Maine, where Muskie was from, and really along rivers and lakes throughout the country. And it was the major turning point in clean water. It's hard to believe that until the mid-60s, Americans did not have a consciousness for clean water. And in 1969, in a very famous but unfortunate incident, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught fire. That's true. It was so polluted that it had so much gas and oil and other impurities in it, it actually caught fire. The photos of that were dynamic and, really woke people up. And probably everybody on a river at that time realized that, geez, if I know our river is very polluted, what's going on with clean water? And Senator Muskie was one of the real leaders of the Clean Water Act in 1972. The Clean Water Act was passed. So here is Haverhill, and you can see some of the changes. Way down the river, you can see it's a new division of the UMass Lowell. Northern Essex Community College has some offices and classrooms there. And on the right, there are new condos and business offices and several new bank branches. So Haverhill is among the communities that is using the river as a centerpiece for improving their community. Here's a wonderful shot. Sometimes we talk of the Merrimack River Valley, the North Shore. This is in the Haverhill and Amesbury area. And this is another wonderful shot from up above and just shows you some of the elements of the river. You can see neighborhoods there. You can see, smaller other tributaries and different elements. And this is just a wonderful photo showing what people see upriver. Lowell, Massachusetts has also used the river for many years. The Industrial Revolution, and that is known in the school books, started in about 1823 in Lowell, Massachusetts. Several mills were built upon it when scientists were able to harness hydropower to run these shops and to make cotton cloth. Now, cotton wasn't much of a substance, at least a commercial substance, until about 1793, when Eli Whitney created the cotton gin. That was mostly in the South, of course, but they could get cotton out of the fields and clean it up in a very rapid way, and then they would send it north. And places like Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill and Manchester built very large mills along the river. And one of the good things was it gave jobs to a lot of people. First, the farm girls from New England, and that's quite well known. They would work 4 or 5 years perhaps and then go back to their farm, maybe start their own families or whatever. But there weren't enough farm girls, and the mills, the number of jobs kept growing. So immigration started, and thousands of immigrants from Europe and from Ireland and from many countries overseas came to New England and worked in the mills. On the right, you can see a dormitory for UMass Lowell. I don't think, I was talking to students, they're not called dormitories, they're called residences and life institutions, things like that. But UMass Lowell, as you can see, is right on the river. They've done a lot with the river. It's very beautiful. They have many places to walk. And one of the elements about the river is that it works for recreation, but it is still aiding the community. And by that, I mean there are dozens of power plants that still harness the river and provide power, electricity, and 500,000 people or more still get their drinking water from the Merrimack. Now, this isn't generally known. I was kind of surprised to hear it, but it is very important because when we say, gee, we need a clean river, some people might say, well, why is that? And well, the answer is that cleaner river makes for better drinking water. Of course, the water is scientifically treated, and there haven't been many outbreaks of disease as there were in the late 19th century, when scientific cleansing of the water was very poor, and the state had to actually create a health commission. They had sent a bunch of scientists from MIT up to Lowell and Lawrence, and they developed a better way of cleaning the water. Young kids and family members were dying of typhoid in the 1880s and 1890s, especially in Lawrence, because the poor people at that time lived near the river. The wealthy people lived away from the river. That's kind of opposite what we have now. But a lot of people got typhoid because the water wasn't being adequately cleaned. But after 1890 or 95 or so, a different regimen was used and the water got better. And so that's one of the interesting elements about the river, I think. And when we talk about the river, this podcast is Life Along the Merrimack, and it's on 96.3 Joppa Radio and also on the local cable. Here's a beautiful spot up in Franklin, New Hampshire. Not everybody knows, but the river starts in Franklin. And the reason I say not everybody knows is there's no sign there, or there's no one spot that says the Merrimack River starts here. I say that because I was up there several times. I took this photo. This is about the start of the river when the Winnipesaukee Stream meets the Pemmicanquawkee River, and they merge very close to here. But there's no sign. So I asked the fellow at the gas station, where does the river start? And I had to coax him along. I guess the question isn't asked that much. But he sent me to behind the high school. So I went, this is not that photo. I have another one in my book. But it was just curious to me that there's no one spot where this is where they merge and this is what's going on. Nevertheless, this is Franklin, New Hampshire, 117 miles away. And up here, it's just about as beautiful as it was a century or two ago. Franklin, New Hampshire, and the other areas up here, and Daniel Webster, the old colonial orator, is from this area. There was not too much textile mills, but they did have paper mills and pulp factories up this far up. So when I was in Franklin, and a couple times I went there taking photos, it was just curious. It's much farther north, and what they dealt with was in creating paper and pulp and boards. And it reminded me of some of the rivers in Maine. My wife and I lived in Maine for 2 decades, and many of the rivers, the Kennebec, the Penobscot, the Androscoggin, they were mills. They were communities that had mills way upstream. And then if you got down closer, such as in Lewiston and Waterville, you had textile and shoe companies. So the Merrimack has always been much used in the commercial vein. And this is, again, one of the reasons why the name of my book is Merrimack, the Resilient River. Somehow the river has always managed to, if not clean itself up, at least remain viable. It's the cleanest now it's been probably in a couple centuries. And that is because, as we said, the Clean Water Act of 1972, but also many of the public servants nowadays, elected officials, are working to clean up the river and to get funding to make it cleaner. State Rep Jim Kelcourse, State Senator Diana DeZoglio, Congresswoman Lori Trahan have all been working to get federal money so that some of the sewage treatment plants here on the river can be improved. Because what happens is in a heavy rainstorm with more building going on, what occurs is the rainwater is in the same system as a sewage treatment plant. Usually that works okay if there's a slight rain. But if you have a downpour, if you get a great deal of rainwater going into the sewage treatment plant, the operators can't handle it all. And so they open the gates and all of the liquid goes out. And that means the effluent, the sewage, and last year, I understand, close to 90 million gallons of effluent mixed with rainwater went into the Merrimack River. So that's what people are concerned about now. Of course, there's more growth, there's more pressure on the sewage treatment plants, but people are finally realizing that much more has to be done to keep the river clean. And so as we go into a new year, I think many of the elected officials will be aware of that. And we talked about how farther up river, it looks like it did several centuries ago. Well, I wasn't around several centuries ago, but this is probably what it looked like. This is just south of Franklin, New Hampshire, which is, as we said, was the start of the river. There's not much development up here. There hasn't been much building along the river. So this is an example of what it looks like, what it may have looked like many decades ago. And this 2 summers ago, a group of about 15 to 20 energetic local officials got in their canoes in Franklin, New Hampshire, went over this mild white water that you see here, and headed towards Newburyport. It took them 4 days. They went about 30 miles a day. And they did this to draw attention to the beauty of the river, which we are talking about right now, and also the need to keep the river clean. They camped out at night. They had planned to camp, in campgrounds or on the schoolyard or something, but it rained hard 2 different nights, so they had to scramble. But you can see the beauty of the river upstream in New Hampshire, and this is just a great shot that shows there's still a lot of nature to the river and beauty. Now here is getting away from the summer a little bit, but this certainly does lend itself to the nature of the Merrimack. Excuse me. And this is near Newburyport, again taken by Brian Eaton. In recent years, as the river has become cleaner and the weather has become a little warmer with climate change and whatever, the river doesn't freeze over as it did a century or so ago. You have ice flows, but you have many eagles coming back, ospreys coming back, some fish are coming up the river again. And here, this fish didn't quite make it up the river, but it did provide breakfast, so that's good. Or perhaps lunch. It looks like, whatever it is, it looks like a large meal. I don't know if I could eat that whole fish. But Brian Eaton took this shot. I think it was in March some time ago, and it just shows a beautiful shot of the river and the nature that has come back to it. Also showing the beauty of the Merrimack River is this shot, photo by Dan Grovak. He is the chair of the Merrimack River Watershed Commission. Watershed Council. And he's a great photographer. I mean, he's not a professional photographer as Brian, but this is just a wonderful sunset, of course, but it all shows some of the old pilings that held up the docks in past years. The Coast Guard used to be based at Plum Island, right down where the Charos fishing boats are kept in the winter. But in about 1973, after the wooden Coast Guard headquarters had been buttressed by storms and hurt by erosion, it was moved into the city, and it's on Water Street, as you folks might know. It's near the downtown and quite close to the Maritime Museum. But this is a beautiful shot showing the expanse of the river. And even the river is quite shallow, particularly at its base. And it's always amazed me that we were able to handle in the air of tall ships that we could handle so much tonnage. It's about 12 to 16 feet, the draw is. And so if you're a very large vessel and you go down farther than 16 feet, farther than 12 feet, you'll likely catch yourself on a sandbar. And that's actually one reason why Newburyport, its age of sail ended in about 1890 or 1900. Ships were becoming iron and steel. They were steamboats, and they did have a bigger draw. And so they couldn't really come in and out of the shallow harbor very easily. So this had been a great boat building community, but they just stopped building when the age of steel ships came in. And another factor was in terms of the tall ships, once they got so large, 300 feet long, perhaps 500 tons, once they might be able to get out of the harbor, but if they were loaded down with cargo, they couldn't get back in. The draw was too great, the river too shallow. But this shows you how beautiful the harbor is. Beautiful. This is the river, just about catching the ocean, and it's a beautiful spot, Newburyport. Now here, and I'll go over this quickly, is kind of what we want to avoid. This is in Methuen, and you can see a couple shopping carts. This is runoff from the street itself, and it's not a very pretty picture, and there are actually dozens of these along the river. Now, this is not hooked up to the sewage treatment plant. This is runoff from the streets, and it exists in just about every community. But this is what people are trying to avoid. And the sewage treatment plants have to be improved, but also better ways have to be found. Make it known to people that this is an asset, and rather than throwing junk into it, we need to preserve it. And if you've been around for a while, you may have seen upstream, particularly pictures of tires being pulled out of the river, bicycles. I think even a car came out one time. It's really terrible. Things are getting better, however. But that's one reason this podcast started out. We talk about the health and history of the river, and we're saying we have to do everything we can to make it clean. So this is our final shot for today. Life Along the Merrimack on 96.3 Joppa Radio. This is the opening of the Merrimack River meeting the Atlantic Ocean. You can see the sandbar on your lower left. You can see the vessels. They're heading for the north part, for the North Jetty there, as you can see, because either they know or they've been warned by radio that it's shallow today, it's probably low tide, and stay to the North Jetty because you don't want to get hung up on a sandbar. So that's it for me. I'm Dyke Hendrickson. The show is Life Along the Merrimack. We're here every Tuesday. We talk about the health and history of the river on 96.3 Joppa Radio and local cable. And we hope to see you the next time. Thank you.